Okay, Romanticism. Specifically, American Romanticism. First of all, let's clear the air here. And let me tell you that romantic, in this sense, does not mean love. That would be romantic with a little r. Romantic, for us, with a big R, means the literary movement, and Romanticism deals with all emotion, not just love. It can be anger, it can be fear, it can be joy. It's given, the Romanticism is a school of thought where they give value of feeling and intuition over reason. So it's going to be what you feel, your gut instinct, and all of that is going to be more important than reason. We're going to talk a lot about imagination. And they believe that you can use your imagination to discover truths that your logical or rational mind couldn't reach. We're going to talk a lot about powerful emotion. What I mean here by unspoiled beauty means that, like, humans have not touched it. Nothing has ruined it. One of the things, we've got imagination, but you got individual feelings. So it's not going to be so much about society anymore. It's going to be about the individual and how that individual feels. Nature's going to be wild, it's going to be dangerous, and all of this is going to be more important than reason, logic, cultivation, and society. The characteristics, yes, you need these, because several of your test questions come from this. Let's see, we've already talked about the first one. Faith. You know, with every literary movement, we have to discuss faith. In this, they're going to have faith in the inner experience. They're going to see God in nature. They're going to see God in the imagination. They're going to shun or, want to get away from civilization and get back to nature. They are going to, you're going to talk a lot about children and or read a lot about children, and people are going to be like really youthful looking and, healthy. They're going to be all about some individual freedom. It's very me. They're going to, the best way to explain this next one is by a poem written by William Wordsworth. It's called something Tintern Abbey. I really can't remember. Anyway, basically, he's talking about how this abandoned church has been overtaken by nature and how that is beautiful, and that took him closer to God than any church service ever could. They're going to look backwards a lot, and they're going to want to talk about, people who have wisdom in the past. They're not going to like progress, and by progress I mean this is the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution. They're not going to like anything that has to do with the Industrial Revolution. A lot of this is going to have to deal with the supernatural when we get to Edgar Allan Poe. Actually, we're going to read Rip Van Winkle, and the supernatural is going to begin there. Because you're going to have little men who are drinking magical beer. They're going to love poetry, and as much poetry as they wrote, we actually don't read a lot of it. And they're going to focus a lot on myth, legend, and folklore. And by that, I mean they're going to go back and they're going to talk about the gods and the goddesses, and they're going to talk about myths. In Rip Van Winkle, they refer back to the myth of, or the legend of Henry Hudson. Alright, here is the definition that I want you to use. And I need you to know the 5 eyes. If I give you a quiz tomorrow and ask you about the 5 eyes, I want you to be able to tell me what the 5 eyes are and why they're important. Okay? I do want you to know that although we classify these as literary movements, they happen across more than just literature. It can be music, it can be art. Alright, imagination. It's going to be emphasized and relied on more than reason. Imagination is a backlash against, the age of reason, which focus more on logic. Imagination is considered from creating all art. I think that's actually one of your questions on your test is, what was considered necessary for creating all art, and it's going to be imagination. I don't need you to have the last one because Coleridge is British. Alright, for intuition, this is your gut feeling. And this is, a lot of times we're going to have characters who are they're not worried about what people are saying and the advice they're being given. It's all about how they feel on the inside. That's going to be more important than reason. Your gut feeling is, all about, it's instinctual, it's emotional, and there's nothing logical about it. Again, I don't need you to have this. Wordsworth, although he was an important romantic, he's not an American romantic, he's British. Alright, idealism. Idealism is the idea that we can make the world a better place, okay? We're going to talk a lot about utopian societies. It's going to refer to the theory that the spirit and the mind and language is all over matter. It's, we can make the world a better place. We just have to figure out how. I don't need you to know about Immanuel Kant. Alright, for inspiration, the artist or the writer is an inspired creator. So something divine, it can be physical, it can be in the imagination, has inspired this art or this literature. And you're going to have a lot of the seize the day mentality, which is, just going with the moment, being spontaneous. It's not all about getting it perfect. It's about going out with a bang. Alright, for individuality, it's always going to be about me, me, me. Like, if you had to remember it some way, I would write me, me, me. About the individual. The reason for all this is because of all of these historical, I would say, not historical, but there are these major breakthroughs that are happening at this point in time about women's rights and abolitionism and how they deserve the right as individuals to do certain things. Then you're going to have Walt Whitman. We're going to read this, or at least part of it. I Celebrate Myself. He basically talks about himself as the quintessential American. Alright, I do want you to know that Romanticism began to take root after the French Revolution, and then it spread over into America. The French Revolution, in case you didn't know, was when the people, or the peasantry, overthrew the aristocracy and basically beheaded the majority of them, wiped out entire families, and took over. And after that, it's like, this is a reaction to that violence. Don't worry about Wordsworth. Some historical background that I do want you to know is that at this time, the Louisiana Purchase has just been completed. We've got this, in America, you've got this high sense of nationalism and self-awareness. Then you've got the War of 1812. A lot of times, or right after all this, people who weren't in America looked at America as a kind of a joke. And then we were successful in the War of 1812, and people were like, wow, maybe we should start looking at America as a real country. Then you've got the Mexican-American War. This is where Texas comes in as a slave state, which is what the South wanted. You've got industrial growth, or the Industrial Revolution, which is where you have growth in transportation, growth in technology. And then all of these things are going to lead up to the women's rights movement, the abolitionist movement, child labor laws. Just so you have some idea, I mean, we all pretty much know about women's rights and abolitionism, but child labor laws are not one of those things that we really study in high school. And at this point, you had children who were working 12 hours a day, and when I say children, like 6 and 7 year olds, working 12 hours a day in lace factories. Or they were chimney sweeps and were dying of the black lung. I do want you to know what a romantic hero is. We're going to talk a lot about the romantic hero. It's really one of the most important early American products or character products. If you ever read The Last of the Mohicans, then you'll kind of get a feel for the American hero or the romantic hero. In Hawkeye, the rational hero would be Ben Franklin. He's one that's supposed to be all for civilization, and he's worldly, he's educated. And the American romantic hero is going to be young and innocent, and he's going to follow his gut, and he's going to be close to nature. I always think of Robin Hood for some reason. Alright, the romantic hero or American romantic hero is usually young. He's usually innocent. He has a pure purpose. And when I say pure purpose, I mean he does it for what he feels is the right reasons. He's got this sense of honor. He does what's right at the moment, not necessarily what's right for society. He has an intuitive understanding of people. And while he might be educated, that's not his only form of education. Or formal education is not his only form. He loves nature. They're going to avoid the towns. When we read Edgar Allan Poe, we're going to talk about that. When we read Rip Van Winkle, we're going to talk about that. And then they're going to have some sort of quest, some sort of, search for higher truth. Here are some things that you're going to be looking for. One is remoteness of setting. In Rip Van Winkle, he's going to go off into the woods in the Fall of the House of Usher. He's going to leave town and drive out through this, haunted looking forest and go find this big mansion. You're going to have some improbable plots. I'm trying to think of something without giving it away. Oh, Rip Van Winkle meets this man in the forest and drinks magical beer, and they lawn bowl. They're going to be unlikely characters in this that you meet. You're going to think, that might be a little far-fetched, but that's what they did a lot in here. Sometimes it's going to be informal. Now, when you go to read Poe, you're probably going to say, Miss Clay, I thought you said this was going to be informal. I don't know what half these words mean. But just because it's informal, it's in the style, not necessarily the words. They're going to experiment in new forms. This is mostly going to be Whitman and his poetry. He invented free verse poetry. And writing is going to be for the individual, not for everybody to read. Alright, for the arts, I would like for you to know some of this, but I'm not that hell-bent on it. You need to look at some of this stuff. They're going to think that, the Middle Ages is all of a sudden extremely it's extremely important. This whole idea of chivalry and courtly love, all that is going to come back into vogue. Shakespeare is going to be extremely popular. Again, he kind of lost popularity during the Age of Reason, definitely during the colonial movement, because, Lord, let's not read anything by Shakespeare if we're Puritans. For the visual arts, you've got the neoclassical art, which is the art that was popular during the Age of Reason. It's very rigid, unemotional. And then you've got romantic art. It's going to have lots of color and lots of depth. It's going to play with light a lot. As an example, this is neoclassical art. Okay, very stark image, and it's very still. And this is romantic art. It plays with light. It's almost like it tells a story. For music, you've got classical musicians, and then your romantic musicians are like Chopin and Liszt. You hear a lot of Chopin and Liszt and Tchaikovsky on the Looney Tunes shows. I don't really think I want you to know that. If there's a question on there, on your test about that, it would be multiple choice, and I don't really think you need it. I'll take that question off. Alright, for literature, we didn't really have that many composers or artists at the time, so it mostly impacted literature because we have tons of people who write. They explore supernatural themes and Gothic themes. By Gothic, I do not mean dyes hair all black, pierces face, and wears makeup that's far too white. I mean Gothic themes. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we actually get to Edgar Allan Poe. Then we're going to talk about the Transcendentalists. This is where you've got God and nature, which is kind of what the Romantics believe, except it's going to take it a step further.